أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم واتل ما أوحي إليك من كتاب ربك لا مبدل لكلماته ولن تجد من دونه ملتحدا. Suwratul-Kahfi, Surah number 18, ayat number 27. Before we proceed with this verse, as I had mentioned when we were doing a brief explanation of the last verse, verse number 26, that was the end of story number 1. So this verse, verse number 27, marks the beginning of message number 2, the intermediary message, the first intermediary message. So you remember the structure, right? The structure is message, story, and all the way down to story and finally the message. So there are 5 stories or 5 histories, if you may, if you want to call it that way, that's fine. And so 5 stories, 4 messages in between, the intermediary message, the introductory message, and the concluding message. So message 1, the introductory message was from verse number 1 to 8. The story number 1 was from verse number 9 to 26, of which 9 and 10 was the pre-introduction, 11 and 12 was the introduction, and 13 to 26 was the main text or body of the story, if you want to call it that way. Whatever it is, and I had said that we need to talk about certain things in a little bit more details now, and we'll do that first before we proceed with verse number 27, which we'll do immediately thereafter. So this story, the story that we just concluded, the story of, or the history of the al-Kahfi, the companions of the cave, this is strongly related or correlated to decoding the Dajjal. Now, aren't the other stories helping us decode the Dajjal? Not in a direct way. They are indirect correlations, but this one has a direct correlation. Now, you would say, okay, but where is the word Dajjal? It's not even mentioned, not even hinted at. So how can this story help us decode the concept of the Dajjal? And that is what I want to precisely help you understand. I want to explain that concept. Okay, so there was this concept. Okay, let me state a hadith and let me refer back to the Quran to help you understand this concept. There is a hadith where the Prophet ﷺ said that Dajjal will be there on the face of the earth for 40 days, one day like a year, one day like a month, one day like a week, and the rest of his days, the rest of 37 days are like your days. So the first 3 days are different. He is in different dimensional reality. The last 37 days is the same. So that means 1 day is equal to 1 day. Now, when we look at the Quran, 1 day in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can it refer to other than 1 day, which is 1 day in our counting? Yes, it can. And there are 4 references, 4 different timelines, time dimensions that being talked about or referenced in the Quran. One is 1 day being equivalent to 50,000 years. 1 day being equivalent to 1,000 years. 1 day being equivalent to 300 years. That's the story. 1 day being equivalent to 100 years. 4 references in the Quran. 3 in the Hadith. 1 day like a year, 1 day like a month, 1 day like a week. Irrespective of whatever the count is, in these 7 dimensions, 50,000 years, 1,000 years, 50,000 years, 1,000 years, 300 years, 100 years, a year, a month, a week, these are different compared to 1 day being equivalent to 1 day, which is the spatio-temporal dimension that we live in. So, this is what I say. This is my explanation. When the Quran refers to samawat, 7 samawat, 7 dimensions, it is referring to these additional or these extra dimensional realities. It's difficult to understand. The human faculties can only fully comprehend the 3-dimensional spatial reality that we live in. But these 7 extra dimensional realities which the Quran and the Hadith refer to together, I mean, there are 4 of those mentioned in the Quran. One day is equal to 50,000 years, 1,000 years, 300 years, 100 years, and the 3 are mentioned in the Hadith: a year, a month, a week. So 7 in all. 4 plus 3 is equal to 7. And the rest of his days, the Dajjal's days mentioned in the Hadith, will be like normal days. 1 day is equal to 1 day. So that is our worldly dimensional reality. That's fine. So what is referenced by Sabah Samawat, my understanding, my explanation, is these 7 extra dimensional realities, where each of the spatial dimensions have a time dimension associated with it. Theoretical physics suggests that there can be multi-dimensional conception of time. It is from the point of view of physics, and from the point of view of mathematics, it is valid. If you want to do more reading about it, go ahead and do that. So that's physics and that's mathematics. If you don't understand physics or mathematics, that's not my fault. My fault in this session is to help you understand Suwratul-Kahfi. I can explain physics and mathematics. That's another subject matter altogether. We will do that in other places. This is not the platform to do that. Okay, so we talked about 7-dimensional reality. Now, the important point to understand is, how is it related to Dajjal? Sure, it is related to Dajjal. Understanding that there can be an extra spatio-temporal dimension of reality is what is hinted in this surah. Sorry, obviously in the surah, but in this story of al-Kahfi, which is definitely in the surah, so it's okay. That understanding is what will help us decode the reality of Dajjal. How is that? So, what was their perception of the time duration that had passed while they were in the cave, the youths? Their perception was a day or a part of a day. So let's consider a day. Okay? So their perception was not 300 years. My question to you is, okay, let's assume that this was a miracle from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah can do miracles, and Allah somehow helped them survive through those 300 years. I say, okay, we understand Allah can do miracles, but Allah does not do miracle without any cause or physical phenomena being associated with it. He does it through those mechanisms. Had they been in our world of dimension, spatio-temporal dimension, if you insist that they were sleeping, which they are not, then after such a long period, let us imagine coma, for example. They were not in a state of coma. They are different from any state that we know of. Even in coma, what happens? For prolonged periods, does our nails grow in a week, a month, a year, in 10 years, 100 years, in 300 years? Our hair, our nails, how much will it grow? So coma is our dimensional reality, right? Our dimensional reality of space and time. This, if you insist that they were in our worldly dimensions, then I say, then when they were reinstated, I would not say awakened, that is wrong. They were not in a state of sleep, so they cannot be awakened. When they were reinstated to this dimension, I mean, I'm suggesting that they were not in our worldly dimension of space and time. They were in a different dimensional reality, and they were put back to this after 300 years. And don't argue with me, 300, 309. We have explained all of those. So what happens is, had they been in our spatio-temporal dimension and 300 years had passed, when they saw each other, wouldn't they have realized that it cannot be a day by looking at the nails and the hair? Did that grow? Obviously, it didn't. That's why the conversation amongst the youths, the friends, was a very natural conversation, as if a day or a part of a day had passed. Nothing more, nothing complicated yet. Nothing to suggest otherwise. What happened essentially was, in that spatio-temporal dimensional reality, which is an extra-dimensional reality. One of those 7 dimensions, Sabasamavat. Those Sabasamavat are not 7 heavens or 7 skies or 7 layers of atmosphere, nothing of the sort. Those are 7 extra-dimensional reality. They were simultaneously existing in our world of dimensions as well as in a specific dimensional, extra-dimensional reality where the passage of time was equivalent to 1 day in 300 years. So the experience that they had when they looked at each other, their appearance, their hunger, it seemed to be in alignment with what would happen in a day, and which is almost imperceptible in terms of looks and maybe a slight hunger in terms of a day. That is what was happening with them. That is what happened with them. Now, if you understand this, then you would realize what the hadith is talking about. The first, the second, and the third day of Dajjal, and the rest 37 days are our days, so that's okay. We will be able to see Dajjal. But in these first 3 days, we will not be able to see him, because there the time flows differently. He is in a different extra dimensional reality in each of those 3 days, where the time passage in those successive days as 1 day being equivalent to 1 day of his time being equivalent to a year, and then 1 day being equivalent to a month, and 1 day being equivalent to a week. Whatever it is, that's a detailed and a separate discussion. We'll have those discussions in other lectures. But this context is important. So we understand, and Dajjal will be in a different dimensional reality. He will not be in our dimensional reality. Okay? So, but the youths were simultaneously in our world of space of time as well as simultaneously in an extra dimensional space of time, which was constant throughout that period. That's why they aged by 1 year. Sorry, by 1 day. No perceptible difference. So with this understanding, if you have, similar to what happened with Uzair alayhi salam, 100 years had passed, 100 years had passed, and he experienced, or he thought it was a day or a part of a day, something similar. But this was in a different extra-dimensional reality. That is in a different extra-dimensional reality. 50,000 years, 1,000 years, 50,000 and 50,000 years, 1,000 years are two of the other. So 4 mentioned in the Quran and 3 mentioned in the Hadith, where it's inherently different. These are extra-dimensional realities that we're talking about. So if you understand that in this context, from this perspective, we will be able to understand the fitna and the fasad that Dajjal is perpetrating through his agents has been there for a long time. We don't have to wait. The first day will not begin in the future. The first day has already begun long time ago. And that's, as I said, is a separate discussion. So this thing, I am not sure. There's physics involved, there is mathematics involved, and I have tried my best to sort of give you a perspective of how this indirectly relates to decoding Dajjal. So you understand that extra-dimensional realities, the space and time, those are very different compared to what we perceive as space and time. With that understanding, we will be in a better position to understand that Dajjal will not be visible for the first 3 days. He will be visible from the 4th day onwards till the 40th day, which is 37 days, which is like our days, and we will be able to see him. The first day, from behind the scenes, so to say, he is permeating all the fitna and the fasad that you can see in the world. Anyway, that was the introduction that was very much necessary, because we are again at a very critical juncture. Verse number 27 marks the beginning of, I should say, message number 2, or intermediary message 1. And the concept itself is quite complicated in this case. Sometimes I do say it's not complicated, but this one is. So we'll start with this verse now. And utlu. So difficult this word is. Utlu, I have mentioned it as follows. The standard, the representative translation seems to be recite. So who am I to suggest a different word in the English language and not use the commonly used word in all the translation? translations, recite. Who am I? Let's take the help of the root word, the verbal root, and do that analysis. Utlu means a number of things, but primarily it means follow. And why is that? When we open the Mus'haf, and that's in front of us, and when we use our index finger to follow along the text, that is what we are doing. And if we are using our index to follow along, to follow the text, then we are also reading it. And we could read out aloud as well. We could recite as well. And once we have done all that, we could convey that to others as well. I mean, our recitation, if it's loud, I mean, recitations are allowed. Reading could be silent, reading could be allowed. Reading out could be allowed. So, when we are reciting, we are also conveying. All of these different words are applicable to Utlu. And once we are conveying, and we are doing all of these, we are also subconsciously taking in the message and the strategies. So we are then also following the text, following what is mentioned in terms of guidance. So it comes a full cycle, a full circle. The follow, different type of follow, and follow as in sort of to obey, that's a different type of follow. And by the usage of the word utlu, just one word, look at the difficulty that I'm having to explain to you by using at least how many? Follow, read, read out, aloud, recite, convey, follow in a different connotation. Follow, first follow is this. The second follow is to follow, to obey. So all of these are put together. And if I have to use one word, I would rather use the word follow, not the others. That's the primary root word meaning. And you do definitely, because there is a loss of meaning. Definitely there is a loss of meaning. We don't translate it as and utulu, whatever. It doesn't make sense because that's an Arabic word. It's not English. So the best that I could do is to use the word follow in this case, and follow. And obviously when you're reading, you have to remember all of the words which I also talked about. Ma is what or whatever. U here, this is in passive, so has been revealed. Ilayka, to you, that is in reference to the Prophet Mohammed sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Min kitabi, from the book. Rabbika, of your Lord. It's an idafa construct. Kitabi Rabbika, so the of comes in between. And follow whatever has been revealed to you from the book of your Lord. And the understanding comes a full cycle. That's also you need to keep at the back of your mind. The next part is La mubaddila li kalimatihi. La is no. Mubaddila is, you can say change, no change. But we are translating, there is absolutely, mubaddila is in the file pattern. So the doer pattern, or the one who does pattern. So badala is change, to change, he changed. Badala, that form is there over here, type 3. So there is absolutely no one who can make any change, li kalimati, to his words. Where is this absolutely coming from? Now, interesting. I don't insert words just for the sake of inserting or just for the sake of adding emphasis. I don't do that. So, la ilaha illallah. Have you heard that? If you have not heard that, why are you wasting your time if you're a Muslim? Because we all know that's the first part of the Shahada, and that's the fundamental and the most important part of the Shahada. The rest can change. During the time of Adam al-Islam, it could be different. During the time of Muhammad, it could be different. That's okay. But la ilaha illallah is the eternal truth. There is no change in that. Okay, so what I'm saying is la ilaha illallah does not mean what you commonly hear, there is no God except Allah. It does not mean that. You would say, hey, wait a minute, we know that. Are you trying to change that meaning as well? No, I'm not trying to change. I'm adding emphasis where it is required. There is absolutely no God except Allah. Does it add to the meaning or reduce the meaning? And that is the correct intonation as well. Because la ilahun illallah, that is a valid Arabic construct. That would mean there is no God except Allah. But the presence of nasab status, la ilaha, that means an absolute negation. So similarly, la mubaddila li kalimati. There is absolutely, and if I translate, there is absolutely no changer, sounds odd, doer, the one who changes. There is absolutely no one who changes, okay, better, but there's absolutely no one who can change. There's absolutely no one who can make any change is the best construct used used in this context to his words. There is absolutely no one who can make any change to his words. That's the intended intonation, and I've explained that why it is so. وَلَن تَجِدَ مِن دُونِهِ مُلْتَحَدًا. Oh, so difficult. Wa and lan is negation. Okay, it's in the future. So, no, never, tajida, find. So, you will not find can be a simple translation. You will not find. What will you not find? Min dunihi, anyone besides him, min zaida. So, the best way to add emphasis in this case is anyone besides him. You will not find anyone besides him. Multahadan. The representative translation seems to be refuge, which I have used, but that's not correct. And we need to understand. Why have I used? I have used because there is no equivalent English word in the English language which can represent this. That's why we need to understand the start to the end, and we need to clarify through brackets. Otherwise, it's simply not acceptable. And explain why. You will say, you'll counter-argue with me that you have used refuge as well. But it's not refuge actually. Multahadan is not refuge. I'll make it easy for you now. Have you heard the word mulhid? Mulhid is an apostate. Okay, but murtad is an apostate as well. And there is a difference. Mulhid is in the sense of heretic, deviant, in that sort of sense. And murtad necessarily is an apostate who used to be a Muslim and he publicly denounced it and said, I'm no more a Muslim. That's a murtad. And mulhid is a heretic, a deviant. It comes from the verbal root lahada. Okay, which means deviant or deviated. He deviated, to deviate, something like that. Now, if that word is used, then it is very surprising if we don't find, because mulhid is such a common term that we use. We know about it. It's not very uncommon. So where is that word in the translation? Where is it? Please explain. And not a single one of the translations capture that. That is not acceptable. And how is that the case then? I don't want to answer that. I've told once, twice, thrice. That's more than enough. You figure it out. Okay. So if that is indeed the case, then each of the phases now will have to be clarified with the use of brackets. The Arabic, by the way, is clear. When we're trying to capture that in the English language, there is a deficiency that's setting in or coming in. And you will definitely not find, and who is the you in this case? The mulhid. For someone who is apostatized, for that person, you will not find anyone besides him in reference to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Which is true. As a refuge, which seems true, but which is not true. So, okay. Anyone besides him, which is true. And him, so Allah is the being whom he apostatized from. The apostate apostatized from, right? Now, as the refuge is okay in the sort of, when you have all this background with you. Otherwise, it is a wrong translation. Now, multahadan is an ism dharf form, pattern. So, it can indicate a place as well as a time. Now, you will definitely not find anyone besides him as a place of refuge. So, when you are standing in front of your Lord on the day of judgment, on the day of resurrection, on the day of Qiyamah, in that place, there is no refuge for you. No one besides him. And if you're thinking in terms of time, because that is also the concept of zarf, ism zarf. So again, at that time, at the time of Qiyamah, when you are resurrected and you're standing in front of your Lord, at that time there is no refuge for you. No one to help you. No one besides him as a refuge. Okay. Now, your situation, if you are lost, will be so pathetic that day. If you are a mulhid, it will be so pathetic. You will not even find, not even a crooked one to bury and hide yourself away from your fate. And where are all these things coming from? Mulhid, remember, lahada, to deviate. A deviated path, a deviant path, a crooked path. So forget about a grave, proper grave. Not even a crooked sort of opening or in the ground. You will not even find a crooked one to bury and hide yourself away from your fate. Your fate has been sealed by that time. If you want to rectify it, do it now. That is too late. So with this background, when we understand refuge, when we understand lahada, mulhid, multahadan, the ism zorf pattern, and the primary, and the meaning, sort of a deviated or a crooked path, and in connotation with your fate, that makes case for a better, that is the only way to translate it. Not even a crooked one, to bury and hide yourself away from your fate. So this part, and you will definitely not find for someone who is apostatized, anyone besides him, the being whom he is apostatized from, as a place and time of refuge, not even a crooked one to bury and hide yourself away from your fate. That is the translation. And min dunihi, anyone besides him, it could potentially also indicate or have a secondary meaning, he in reference to it, that is the Quran. Because the Quran, in certain hadith statements, it's mentioned that the Quran will protect you, or it will intercede for you on the day of resurrection. So it could mean that, but the primary meaning. So in that case, the Quran will be a refuge in that sense. But for these people, mulhids, no chance whatsoever. So, but anyway, the primary meaning is good enough for us. So, but if you read this, and you will definitely not find for someone who is apostatized, anyone besides him, the being whom he is apostatized from, in reference to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course, as a place and time of refuge, as a place and time, the ism zorf concept, connotation, the structure, the construct, not even a crooked one to bury and hide yourself away from your fate. With that in the back of your mind, now if you shorten the translation, and you will definitely not find anyone besides him as a refuge, that sort of can be acceptable. But refuge is nowhere in the translation. Why did I use it then? That is because, there is no single equivalent word in the English language which can represent that concept, that can capture that as a concept. So I have to use, the minimum that we need to use is as a place and time of refuge in that sense, nothing more. So we'll read it. How profound can a verse be? And what a powerful way to start a message, an intermediary message, the second message of this surah. وَأُتْلُ مَا أُوهِيَ إِلَيْكَ مِنْ كِتَابِ رَبِّكَ لَا مُبَدِّلَ لِكَلِمَاتِهِ وَلَنْ تَجِدَ مِنْ دُونِهِ مُلْتَحَدًا. And follow whatever has been revealed to you from the book of your Lord. There is absolutely no one who can make any change to his words, and you will definitely not find for someone who is apostatized anyone besides him, the being whom he is apostatized from, as a place and time of refuge, not even a crooked one to bury and hide yourself away from your fate. And a simpler translation, now that we have this, and follow whatever, and follow is obviously multiple words are required, but since we are doing a simple translation, and follow whatever has been revealed to you from the book of your Lord, there is absolutely no one who can make any change to his words, and you will definitely not find anyone besides him as a refuge. That's it. But that is not optimal, far from optimal, if you don't have all this background in mind. And if you say, okay, the other translators or scholars have used refuge for similar reasons, no, that cannot be the case. Mulhid is a very common term. You cannot bypass that. That's it then. We'll proceed with verse number 2 of this intermediary message, verse number 28 of Suratul-Kahfi, and that's in the next session, inshallah.